So, so how we create memory is called encoding. So that's how we gather new information and consolidate it into what we know as a memory, something that we know. So there's two different ways that this happens. The first way is automatic processing. So that's when we gain information without much effort. We passively absorb it from the environment. So we're not like consciously knowing that we are learning this information and picking up information from the environment, everything we see and hear. So that's the first method. And then the second one is controlled or effortful processing. So that's when we actively try to memorize information. So when you're studying, that's pretty much controlled or effortful processing, because you're actively forcing yourself to learn this information. It's not just something that we picked up from the environment. So those are two different ways. They differ because automatic processing, it's not much effort or conscious thought put into memorizing this information, while controlled processing, you're actively using your brain power and effort to memorize this information. But controlled effortful processing can also become automatic with practice and over time. So like when you first start driving, you're obviously looking around the road, being careful, looking at your speed and everything. But once you have been driving for a while, it won't take much effort at all. You'll just be driving. You won't even know it sometimes. Any questions on that part? Okay. So next slide. So there's different types of encoding. So visual encoding is when we're taking in information through images that we see. So with our eyes, it's the weakest type of imagery because there's so much that we can see at once and it's hard to process everything at the same time. So it's the weakest type. And acoustic encoding is when we process sound information from our surroundings, and it's intermediate. But the most powerful kind of encoding is semantic encoding. So that's information that we give a particular meaning and context, so something that is important to us and we relate to. So obviously that's the easiest one for us to encode and turn into a memory because we place a significant amount of meaning and context into it. So related to semantic encoding is a semantic network. So these are concepts that are linked based on a similar meaning and context. So when we learn something, if we already have information that is similar to the information that we learned, it's easier to remember it because we'll relate the new information that we learned to something that we know is important and we already know in our mind. All right, any questions on that? Okay, so there are a few different ways that we use to remember and consolidate information into a memory. So the first part related to the semantic encoding is the self-reference effect. So so this is a phenomenon that we recall information best when put into the context of our own lives. So whenever we gain information and we can relate it to something that we've already experienced, something in our life, it's easier for us to remember that information. And the next thing is maintenance rehearsal. So that's when you repeat information over and over again. So what you're doing currently while you're studying for the MCAT, you're repeating this information over and over again. You're keeping it in your working memory so you can move it to your short-term memory and then eventually into your long-term memory for when you take the MCAT. So many times we'll try to use things like mnemonics that help us memorize information easier. So we'll use acronyms like LabRat, PEMDAS, stuff like that to help us remember more information. Or we use rhyming phrases, so certain phrases that rhyme in order for us to make it catchy and we'll remember it better. So like a lot of like commercials, they use like things that rhyme or phrases that rhyme, so then we'll remember it in our head. So it's something like catchy that we remember in our head, and it's easier for us to remember it later on in the future. So all these different mnemonics, they provide organization to information. So we'll have a whole bunch of information, but if we can consolidate it into something small and concise that we can remember, it'll be a lot easier to remember in the long run. So there are a few different mnemonics covered on the MCAT. So the first one is called method of loci. So loci is Latin for like location. So what this mnemonic does is you associate a particular item on a list that you want to remember with a location on a route that you already know. So this one I don't really understand. I have never used this in my life, so I'm not sure how effective this is. But so pretty much you have a route that you memorize. So like maybe like the route from going from your bedroom to your basement. So on the way, you'll pass like your bathroom, your kitchen, your living room, and you'll place use those to represent a particular thing that you're trying to memorize. So you can think of the bathroom as like bathroom as like, oh, this amino acid, glutamine, not glycine, and then your kitchen as alanine, and then your living room as phenylalanine, as tryptophan. So then along the route, so you just memorize your location and then the route that you're taking to a different location, and each item on the list is associated with a different spot on your journey. Yeah, like I said, I don't think that's a very effective way of studying, but who knows? Some people might like that. Another one is peg word. So that's when you associate numbers with an item that rhymes and resembles the number. So one, you could remember like 1 gun, 2 blue, something that rhymes with the number on a list. This one I also don't think is very effective, but yeah, maybe it works. And then the last one is like what I usually use, called chunking clustering. So that's when you take a bunch of separate elements and you try to group things with similar meaning and in a specific context. So if you have a bunch of items, maybe you'll want to organize them into like a specific color or a specific size, just so they have something in common that you can group them into when you're studying.